All right, number three, how do you get FAANG interviews? Kind of a predictable question to make it into the top five, but yeah, we will answer. It's a good question. It's an important question. Just for to kind of as a prelude to my answer, we're going to essentially treat FAANG as big tech, which is more akin to like the five companies that you see in the graphic here. Breaking into big tech, as like Rahul kind of did in his previous answer, like we like to be honest with this community as a whole. Breaking into big tech as a junior engineer is effectively impossible unless you're going to one of these extremely renowned institutions like Stanford. Breaking into big tech as a junior engineer is more or less impossible. It's like 0.001% chance. And I define junior as less than 2 years of experience. So if you're within that 0 to 2 years of experience range, and you're trying to get into big tech, you're cold messaging every Google recruiter you see on LinkedIn, and you're applying to every online like thing you find for Facebook, whatever. If you don't start seeing results like immediately, I would just stop investing your time there. You're just kind of throwing your time into a black hole, and it's just going to be sad if like, for every application that gets ghosted or you get a rejection. And the reason behind this is that, well, number one, the supply of junior engineers is just really, really high, especially now. So many people are coming into tech. And then I think the pandemic really accelerated that. And the accessibility of tech is also a big factor. Like anyone can follow a tutorial for like React or whatever and build a really nice looking website in like 2 or 3 months, even if they don't have any experience coding before. So the supply of junior engineers is crazy, crazy high. And the demand for big tech jobs is also crazy high. So it's just the numbers don't really check out. So how do you get into big tech when you've kind of progressed past junior engineer phase? So from what I've seen, for the most part, if you live in a relevant geography, big tech will generally start reaching out to you once you have 2 to 3 years of experience, provided you have kind of like the necessary prerequisites to be like a participant in the corporate tech world. And the main thing being like a pretty decent LinkedIn profile. They'll start reaching out to you because like big tech, like they can't hire like these more experienced engineers like fast enough. They just want more and more of them. I think Google in particular is really good about casting a very, very wide net. Pretty much everyone I know, regardless of like which school they came from or like what company they worked for their first job for the first 2 or 3 years of their career, has gotten a reach out from Google. And once you hit 5 years of experience, then big tech will definitely come to you, because 5 years is generally the kind of like the beginning of the cutoff for like at that point you could be a senior level engineer, even at a company like Facebook or Google. So like once you get to 5 years of experience, especially if you live in a relevant geography where these companies are, they'll start coming to you. And that's, I think, really reflects like kind of how tech works as a whole. So my answer from all that rambling was effectively patience. That's how you get big tech interviews. You just get enough experience that you're kind of out of the junior bucket, and then you wait, and you have a decent LinkedIn profile and you have a decent network, and they'll come to you. And patience is such an important virtue being in tech in general. So you might be asking, like, if I don't live in a relevant geography, or I am a junior engineer and I still want to get into big tech, what do I do? So there are like some more like nuclear levers here that you can pull. The first one is side projects. I have seen folks get into these companies extremely early, building up like a crazy side project. But keep in mind, like, even though not a lot of side projects are being built today by people, like pretty much all the people who have built good side projects are also going to be applying to big tech. So like when you apply to a position of big tech, you're also going to be competing with people who have side projects, assuming you have one of your own. So the bar is actually pretty high. Like the folks I know who got into like Facebook and Google off of a side project, they built a really big side project, like at least 10,000 active users, usually like 50,000 to 100,000 plus. And again, it's because the bar is high. The second kind of nuclear lever I've seen is open source contributions. So as we all know, like these big tech companies have a really big presence in the open source community. Facebook in particular has like a ton of open source libraries. If you can get a couple, like a good amount of pull requests merged into like major open source repos, like especially those that these companies own, that's a very good sign that you are at the level to contribute production code at these prestigious companies. But again, like this is no like walk in the park. These open source libraries, these massive ones run by these massive companies, are generally extremely high quality. So if you're going down this route, you're going to have to, clone the repo and then understand the code base. And then once you understand the code base, figure out like what feature that these libraries can have, and then add that. And then after you add that, you have to submit a pull request, which is going to be very hard to get merged in because you're essentially getting your pull request reviewed by some of the most strong engineers in the world. And I've seen pull requests on these repos go back and forth like literally 30 times, like back and forth for like 3 weeks, for like over a month. And sometimes they even get closed. Like the resolution is, okay, maybe this PR is just not needed. So this is also a very difficult path, but it is feasible. And oh yeah, right. One thing I forgot to add is when it comes to big tech, I personally would not even spend time applying online or cold messaging folks. It's just the volume of applications they get is just so high that I think if you go through these two avenues, you're more or less going to get blackballed. The only two ways to really get into these companies is number one, a recruiter finds you, or number two, you have a referral. So yeah, Rahul and I have talked about the importance of networking. Networking is so crucial when it comes into big tech because, like I said, like online applications and cold messaging, like it's the yield is extremely, extremely low. And getting into these companies is very hard, but not impossible. And if you make 100 friends and none of you are in big tech, I can guarantee you within 2 or 3 years, at least one person will get into big tech, and then you can ask that person for a referral.
One thing I'll add is if you are lucky enough to attend, if you're a student and you're lucky enough to attend a college where you have a career fair where these big tech companies come, that could also be a fairly low cost way to hand your resume to someone so it doesn't go into a black hole. But I mean, I think I do broadly agree with what Alex is saying around how if you're coming from the middle of the country, or if you're international and you're trying to get into one of these top tech companies in the US, it is actually quite difficult. And the reason why is because recruiters are basically doing pattern matching. So I don't think it's surprising to any of you when I say that like recruiters are almost never the decision maker around whether an engineer gets hired. I don't know of a single company where a recruiter can decide that. Almost always the recruiter is the one who will get you into the door, and then you interview, and then engineers will give you feedback around whether this person is crossing that quality bar that they're looking for, and they give you an offer or not. And so people already know that. I think everyone knows that. But one of the consequences of that fact is that recruiters are essentially beholden to engineers. The motivation for a recruiter is I want to engage the people and get people to interview at my company who are likely to pass the interview. And so if that's your mindset, it's not surprising as a recruiter that you're going to basically do a lot of pattern matching. You're going to say, hey, I know that people from Carnegie Mellon and MIT and Berkeley, a lot of them do quite well on these interviews. So I'm going to reach out to them. If you work at Microsoft or work at Amazon, you probably already have some understanding of data structures and algorithms. You have some experience. I want to reach out to you. But barring that, like if you don't have the relevant experience, you don't go to one of these top schools, you don't have a huge side project, and you also don't have any open source contributions to like the React open source project, right? If you don't have any of those, then you're not giving the recruiter a reason to match you among their algorithm in their head, their heuristic in their head of why you will likely pass the interview. And they're focused purely on how can I get people who will likely pass the interview? I don't want to waste my engineer's time. So just like keeping that in mind, that that's how a recruiter is thinking about reaching out to people. That's basically kind of reiterating what Alex was saying, that if you're brand new, then you have to have one of these things like a side project or open source as the things that you can control. And if you don't have that, then you just need to gain some more experience at whatever company you're at. And then the big tech opportunities will come later on.